Well, hello, everyone. Welcome into the View House Centennial, and it is a fantastic Monday night here on Xfinity Monday Live because we got the one and only voice of your Denver Broncos, Dave Logan, in the house. Just
How
found
are you,
out
Romy?
you've been calling him for 34 years. You've seen some stuff.
Yeah, you know what? I've been blessed to do it for a long time, and I have seen, I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yes.
Right? So it's, a little bit of ugly and some bad in the last few years, but plenty of good too.
Yes, we'll get into that. But speaking of the good, the bad, the ugly, I feel like that very much encompasses what we saw from the Lions yesterday. That's where I want to start. A lot of questions now about Dan Campbell's decision-making late. Look, on one hand, live by the sword, die by the sword. He's always gone for it on fourth down. But on some of those, to not go for the field goal and tie it, to go for it on fourth down, some of those decisions late, what do you make of what went down?
Well, I'll preface my remark by saying I'm a big Dan Campbell fan.
Yeah.
I actually sort of enjoyed his initial press conference when he was talking about we're going to get up and we're going to bite kneecaps, and everybody was like, what is this guy doing? But as a former player, that sort of resonated with me. That said, listen, 25 times this year they've gone for it on 4th and 3 or less, and they converted 20 of 25. But I think, especially in the fourth quarter, down 3 with 7.5 to go, it's a 47 or 48-yard field goal. To me, you got to kick it and then kick it off and put some pressure back on San Francisco. So I can live with the first one. I probably would have kicked both, to tell you the truth, but certainly the last one.
Yeah. Does this come down to experience? I mean, Detroit's season was amazing, but now you've got the 49ers who've been here a lot, the Lions. Do you think Dan Campbell maybe is different next season, if he's in the same position?
Well, I think you always expect them to grow, right? I mean, he's gonna be more experienced. He's gonna know what to expect in certain situations. He's an aggressive guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan Campbell coached in the NFL, I think, in a very similar way to how he played.
Okay.
He was a guy that was a big, strong, blocking tight end, very, very tough, and he coached that way. So the hard thing about it is they were right there. They had every chance in the world to win the game. I thought the collar got a little bit tight for Detroit in the second half.
Yeah.
And you got receivers, dropping balls that you just cannot drop in a big game. And so it was there for them to win. They didn't, and as he said after the game, it's really tough to get back to that position.
Yeah, it is. And on the other side, you've got Brock Purdy. There's been so many questions, I think, since he entered the league. Is it just because he's in Shanahan's system? Is it just because he's got all of these weapons? What have you learned about Brock Purdy these past couple games?
I think a little bit of all of that.
Yeah.
He's not the most gifted quarterback. He's very smart in his decision-making, throws a nice pass, understands what Kyle wants to do. And so I probably think he's better than a lot of people think. Is he an elite ball thrower? I don't know, but he throws it well enough that you can win. And you saw him in the second half. He was 13 of 16. Didn't particularly play well in the first half. The 49ers offense was a complete no-show. But 13 of 16 in the second half, he moved, he ran for over 50 yards. I mean, he was one of the central reasons that the Niners are advancing to the Super Bowl.
He was a gamer. And speaking of gamers, you got Patrick Mahomes. He's in the Super Bowl again. You've called enough of these games between the Broncos and the Chiefs. But with Mahomes, I mean, are you surprised 6 years in how much success he continues to have?
I'm really not. I just am amazed when I see him play of how smart he is and how he can make you miss in the pocket. He can extend with his legs. He's very accurate when he throws it. He's got an excellent arm. He's just a great, great young quarterback. And, that game against Baltimore, my biggest question was why the Ravens didn't run Lamar a bit more. He had 44 dropbacks for Lamar Jackson, and 6 times they handed the ball to the running backs. Baltimore led the league in rushing, and I thought they got sort of, I won't say scared, but they got forced away from the running game a little bit too quickly because the Chiefs had 2 quick touchdowns.
It did feel like that a lot. I've got so many more questions. We got to take a break right now, which is very disappointing, but don't worry. We got a lot more coming up here on Xfinity Monday Live, and we are so thrilled. What a treat. We got Dave Logan in the house. We're going to play a good game of fact or fiction. You ready?
Okay.
All right. This is how we're going to talk Broncos. Fact or fiction? The starting quarterback for the Broncos for the 2024 season is on the roster.
Ooh.
Came out with a doozy.
Ooh, man. I'm going to say
Thinking about
fiction.
it. Fiction.
I'm going to say fiction.
All right.
I guess it could be Jarrett Stidham.
Sure.
I think Sean likes Jarrett Stidham. And, he's an athletic guy. He's got a good arm. There are things to like about Jarrett. But I also think there'll be somebody else that will be brought in.
Sure.
I think there'll be another veteran brought in to compete for that job. And I'm not sure what the Broncos will do in terms of the draft.
Yeah.
I think, again, it boils down to does Sean Payton see one of these young dudes in the draft that he feels like, you know what, that's somebody that we can win with for the next 10 to 15 years. And if so, you put a package together, or you try to, you move up in the draft and you take a shot.
Is this one of those things, at 12, you got to take a quarterback, or no, you take best player available?
Well,
if you're not packaging to
yeah, I mean, to me, you've got to get the quarterback thing figured out.
Yeah.
I think one thing we have learned in playing in the NFL for a long time and calling NFL games and just being a fan of the game, you got to have one of those dudes.
Yeah.
You got to have one of those guys if you're going to make a sustained run. You might find somebody that, has an aberration of a year. You can win some games, but you've got to have one of those guys. And I think right now the organization feels like they don't.
Yeah.
So do they have to pick one at 12? They don't. But I think they have to have a clear-cut answer in terms of what are we doing at quarterback for the short term, the midterm, and even long term.
Yeah. Well, then begs the question, outside of quarterback, you look at the roster, feels like could be a lot that needs to be done. So fact or fiction, major changes are coming to the Broncos roster this offseason.
That is a fact.
That is a fact.
That is a fact. Now, I think they're hampered a little bit because of the cap situation.
Yeah.
I think there'll be some guys that are good football players that Broncos fans have gotten used to seeing make plays that either will have to restructure their deals or they will maybe be released. That's the unfortunate business side of the NFL,
Yeah.
right? When you are in cap purgatory, so to speak. But I do think we'll see changes. I think you're going to look at some defensive line help. You're going to look at the running back position and the wide receiver position. I think those rooms will change.
Yeah.
Right. I think the wide receivers. Cortland had a really good year. Jerry, I think, has a really good skill and can be that kind of player. But they're spending a lot of money in that one room, and sooner or later, when you are in cap trouble, you got to look to see where you can pare costs.
It's going to be really interesting. All right, we got like 30 seconds, so this will be a quick one. Fact or fiction? We know it won't be the Broncos, but between the Avs and Nuggets, there'll be another parade in Denver this summer.
That is a fact.
One or two?
And I'm shooting for two.
I love it.
I'm shooting for two. Nuggets playing great basketball, playing Milwaukee tonight. And the Avs right now are about as hot as any team in the NHL.
That's great. We just need them to send some of that mojo over to the Broncos.
Yeah, spread it around a little bit.
A little bit, but we'll take two parades. Why not? We got to take a break over here, and we'll go send it over to the studio where we find our friend Michael Spencer. Hey, Michael, thank you so much. We're having a good time. How could you not? We got Dave Logan in the house, and of course, you know what that means. We got a lot of fan questions, so let's get into the People Want to Know. People Want to Know brought to you by Centura Health, official healthcare partner of the Denver Broncos and champions for the communities we serve. I like this one. Jerry wants to know your favorite Super Bowl that you've called.
Oh, I think the favorite would be Super Bowl 32, right? Because that was the first Super Bowl the Broncos won. They were decisive underdogs and won it in rather dramatic fashion. So I remember calling that game, and at the end of it, when I realized, hey, they're one stop away from winning the Super Bowl, it just, my memory growing up here in town just flooded with memories of how bad they were back in the 60s and how long a lot of Broncos fans had been waiting for this moment. And fortunately, the Broncos came through in a big way.
I love it. One of my favorite calls of all time when you did the helicopter in your call. You can tell this man wants to win this game. It's the best. You did it a lot better than I just did. But that was the People Want to Know, brought to you by Centura Health. And we are with the legendary Dave Logan tonight. Such a treat. And speaking of legends, we lost a giant in the broadcasting world. Larry Zimmer no longer with us. He called your games in college and the pros. What impact did Zim have on you?
Oh, gosh. Larry and Bob Martin were the voice of the Broncos when I was in high school. And then Larry, of course, did CU football and basketball at that point. That's where I first got to know him. And then, of course, my playing career. And then I came back. And honestly, Larry was very responsible for me ever finding my way to KOA. He called me in the spring of 1990. And it was after Bob Martin had passed and said, Dave, I think you ought to apply for the job. And I never really even considered it up until that point, but I did. And he was absolutely right. I worked with Zim the first 6 years of my career calling Broncos games. Just an authentic person, a guy that loved people, treated people the right way, had such a distinctive style and voice in calling games. But I never heard one person say a bad word about Larry Zimmer.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate I got a chance to visit him 4 or 5 days before he passed. And he was sharp as a tack mentally and at peace with kind of where he was. But just to reminisce and talk about some of the really great memories we had was really good for me.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing with us. That's beautiful. He was a legend, and you're a legend. From one legend to another, we're so lucky here in this town. Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate
today.
it, Romy.
This has been such a pleasure.
Great to see you.
Guys, we'll see you tonight at 10 o'clock.